Hello, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to look at a Greek philosopher named Aristarchus. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you want to learn more about ancient philosophy, check out the Ancient Philosophy podcast. Aristarchus was a philosopher from the Hellenistic period. His exact dates are unknown, but he was active in the 4th century BC, possibly from 360 BC to 265 BC. He was born in Athens, but his parents were originally from the coastal city of Sunium. Aristarchus was a philosopher, but it seems he was also involved in politics at different times of his life. He is best known for being one of the founders of the Stoics. And he was a student of the Cynic philosopher Diogenes, who himself was a student of Antisthenes, so they trace their lineage back to Socrates. He was a student of Diogenes, but he was also a teacher, advisor, and close friend of Zeno of Citium, who founded Stoicism. So he was an important figure in the early development of this philosophy. There are very few surviving sources that talk about Aristarchus, so we have little information about his life. Diogenes Laertius, who wrote a summary of the lives of the most famous Greek philosophers, called the Lives of Eminent Philosophers. He says that Aristarchus was ugly and lame. This is not a very flattering description, but some scholars think that Diogenes Laertius might be using this anecdote to tell us something else. Maybe Aristarchus was unattractive because he didn't conform to social norms. Maybe he didn't care about how he looked or how other people thought of him because he was focusing on other things in life. Or maybe he was trying to make a point that physical beauty isn't important. But of course, we don't really know what Diogenes meant by this. We can only guess. Another story that Diogenes Laertius tells about Aristarchus is that once when he was walking with a friend, someone passed between them and the friend stepped aside to let the person pass. Aristarchus didn't move, so the person bumped into him and fell over. Then Aristarchus said, "It's not rude to barge into people who stand aside." This is supposed to show us how independent Aristarchus was, how he wasn't afraid of anyone, and how he could be stubborn. It also shows us that he cared more about being right than about other people's opinions of him. About his philosophical views, we have much more information. Unfortunately, none of his work survived, but we have summaries of his ideas in the works of other authors. He was a prolific writer and he covered many topics: logic, physics, ethics, politics. In particular, he wrote about the nature of happiness and what it means to live a good life. These are perennial philosophical questions and they still resonate today. One of the main themes in his work is the idea of living according to nature. He believed that we should understand what our nature is and then try to live up to it. Living according to nature doesn't mean just doing whatever you want. For Epicurus, it meant living in harmony with the rational order of the universe. Reason is the fundamental principle in the universe, and it's also the defining characteristic of human beings. So reason is the way we understand the order of the universe. We use reason to understand our place in the cosmos, to understand what we ought to do and what we ought not to do. Our duty is to use reason to improve ourselves, and to live in harmony with the universe. When we do this, we live virtuously. But when we ignore our rational nature, we become irrational, like animals. So if we want to live a good life, according to Aristarchus, we need to understand what our nature is and then try to live up to it. The first step is understanding, and the second step is action. Action is based on understanding. If we don't understand who we are and what we ought to do, we can't take any action. So knowledge is the foundation of action. You can't do anything without knowing anything, right? We can't just jump into action. We must first know what to do, and then we can act. In his book, On the Chief Good, Aristarchus argues that we should understand what kind of creature we are, what sort of thing we are, and then we should also realize what the universe is like, and then we should try to live in accordance with nature. So first we need to understand ourselves, and then we need to understand the world, and then we can act in a way that is appropriate to ourselves and to the world. He also talks about the role of emotions, and here he diverges from Socrates and the other Athenians. He thinks that emotions are not bad, they're part of human nature, and in fact, the Stoics will later develop the idea of the passions as a source of strength and wisdom. But for Aristarchus, the key is moderation. Even the virtues are strengths that need to be kept in check. If we allow them to grow too strong, they become vices, so we need to be moderate in our emotions. And this is how we'll be wise. If we allow our anger to grow too big, we become like a horse that's out of control. But if we keep our anger in check, if we allow it to be a virtue, then we can use our anger to motivate us. We can use it to help us improve ourselves and the world around us. The Stoics were interested in politics, and Aristarchus was no exception. He thought that we should participate in politics, and that we should try to make the world a better place. He believed that the ideal government was a constitutional monarchy, where a wise king ruled over the state. In this way, the needs of the whole would be taken care of, and there would be no conflict between the rich and the poor. But he also recognized that constitutional monarchies were rare. Most states were either monarchies or aristocracies or democracies, and each of these had their own problems. Monarchy is dangerous because the person who holds power can abuse it. Aristarchus talks about the two kinds of kings, the lion and the fox. The lion is a metaphor for a truly virtuous king, a constitutional monarch who rules for the benefit of the people. But the fox is a metaphor for a king who is motivated by personal gain. He uses trickery and cunning to get what he wants. So while a constitutional monarchy is the best form of government, a monarchy can also be the worst form of government, especially if the monarch is motivated by self-interest. In a democracy, the majority rules, but the majority can also be wrong. And if we follow the majority, we will be led astray. So we should be careful about blindly following the majority. Aristarchus believed that the job of the philosopher was to try to persuade the masses to see the error of their ways and to improve themselves. One of the most interesting things about Aristarchus is that he seems to have been interested in science. There is a story told about him by Plutarch, a Greek biographer who lived in the 1st century AD. In his essay on the face about in death, Plutarch says this: Aristarchus was one of the first people who asserted that the earth moves. He tried to prove that the earth was round, and he also tried to measure its circumference. He believed that the earth was a sphere because everything else in the universe seemed to be spherical. The sun, the moon, the planets, even the mountains on the horizon. All these things appeared to be spherical. And since the earth was part of the universe, Aristarchus thought it should also be spherical. So he wanted to measure the earth's circumference. He knew that the earth was a sphere, but he didn't know exactly what its shape was, and he also didn't know its size. So he decided to try to measure it. He went to the Egyptian city of Syene, where the Nile River is exactly south of the North Pole. So at noon, when the sun was directly overhead, no shadow would appear. Then he went to a temple about 6 minutes away. At noon, he measured the shadow cast by the obelisk there. He knew the angle of the shadow, so he used basic trigonometry to calculate the circumference of the earth. Unfortunately, his calculation was off by a bit. He thought the circumference of the earth was about 250,000 stadia, but the actual circumference is about 400,000 stadia. Still, he was close, and most importantly, he was the first person who calculated the circumference of the earth. We don't know much about Aristarchus, but we can learn a lot from the stories that ancient writers tell about him. He was an important figure in the early development of Stoicism, and he was also one of the first scientists in the Western world. He was a pioneer in the study of astronomy, and he made important contributions to our understanding of the Earth and the universe. Thanks for watching. My name is Anonymous. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. If you want to learn more about ancient philosophy, check out the Ancient Philosophy podcast.